So you said I definitely did the Down syndrome people are happier.
Yeah. And you asked like if 96% of those that are in the church are okay. Okay, we are here for another week with Alycia Wood in our Q&A session. Thank you for everyone who is joining us and watching us today. We are glad that you could be here. Hopefully you, again, have already seen the message from this morning. And again, just a quick introduction. I'm Aaron Owen. I'm Pastor Aaron from Scarborough Chinese Lions Church. I'm the English ministry pastor. And once more, we are so grateful for Alycia and the opportunity to partner with her and Lighten in order to bring to you both last week and this week the sermons and also the Q&A. And what we hope to do with our time, as we did last week, is just to answer as many of the questions that you have as possible pertaining to the topics of God, faith, truth, Christianity, or really any questions that you may have. So our guest this morning, once more, is Alycia Wood, and we'd like to welcome her again to join us this week. And again, just a very brief introduction since we introduced her already. She is part of the Lighten Group, founded in October 2021, which is a team committed to journeying with those looking to find answers to some of the hardest questions of life by considering Jesus, who has claimed himself to be the light of the world. And so Alycia was born and raised in Rochester, New York. And one of her passions that she has developed has been in the area of apologetics. And so her most recent endeavor has brought her to many universities, college retreats, as well as both public and private events globally. Alycia spent 8 years doing apologetics ministry with the Ravi Zachariah International Ministries before joining Lighten. And so again, we are so happy that she is here with us. And just before we just ask if Alycia, if you have any opening comments, I'll just mention as well, wherever that you are joining us from, if you do have a question that you would like to ask, and you see on the screen displayed, you can either use the QR code, scan it and ask a question through the form, or you can text us a question through the phone number that you see here. And just to note that standard text rates will apply. And so again, over the course of this following hour, we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. And so Alycia, before we start, any comments from you, opening remarks?
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for spending time again with us this morning. I hope that you found, it seems like there's lots of questions off of things that I said, which is great. That's what I want, because it means that we are thinking through different ideas. And I think that's really important in our societies. Oftentimes we are not encouraged to think through all the ideas that we should, and we just kind of believe things because people say. And so I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions. And please, if feel free to write whatever you would be helpful to you. So maybe a question even that isn't even related to my talk, but that is maybe something that's really pressing on you, or that you're really feeling like, oh, I really want to ask this or understand this better. I welcome you to do that too, just to make sure that nobody leaves feeling like, oh, I couldn't get to ask a question because it wasn't exactly what they were looking for. So I'm looking for whatever you have, whatever your questions are, I'm happy to engage with. So good morning to you all.
All right, thank you, Alycia. And so I guess we will get right to it this morning, since we do have a lot of questions that have been submitted so far. And so the first question this morning, in Alycia's talk, she mentioned that rape would not be justifiable even if there were a good outcome. Why does it seem like there is no justice in passages like Deuteronomy 22, 28 to 29, where a rape victim must marry her rapist? And so just before you respond, I can also just put up the passage that's been referenced in Deuteronomy. And so I can just read that out loud to everyone as well. Sorry, let me just see. No. Okay. Here we go. Oh, no. Okay, my apologies. Some technical difficulties here.
Oh, that's okay. This is technology. I can read it for you if it makes it easier.
Oh, sure. Why don't we do that?
So all right. So Deuteronomy 22, 28 through 29. If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married and rapes her and they are discovered, he shall pay the girl's father 50 shekels of silver. He must marry the girl, for he has violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives. This is a great, great question because I think one of the things that is easy for us to do, whoever we are, religious or not, is to read the Bible and understand it in a way as if it was written in 2022. And when it gets to the Old Testament, there are things that we're talking about a culture that is thousands of years old. So it's a very different culture. It's in a different part of the world than Canada. And they function, in order for us to understand how they function, we need to do a little bit more work than just read something and think we know and understand what it means. So when it comes to this passage, let me make a few points. Number one, it's interesting to us that let me say this first of all. The reason why people are upset with this passage is because it seems like this rape happened, which is horrible. And as opposed to the man being punished, she actually has to marry this man. And that just seems even more horrific, right? So you have to marry the person who abused you, who violated you, who scarred you, who traumatized you. And so for us, obviously, when we see these things happen in our modern culture, we don't make somebody marry the woman. We actually we actually penalize them. They do prison and things like that. So this just seems so foreign. How in the world could this possibly be? One of the things that I think is going to be really important here is to note that God does not say, here's what the text doesn't say. It doesn't say, rape the woman, and the woman that you rape, marry her. In other words, what we see is there is a moral wrong that happens. And as a result, God is saying, because of this moral wrong, here is the action that you need to take. Now, that still doesn't necessarily make us feel better. So God says that rape is morally wrong, but he's saying that the way to deal with it is to marry her? Like, how does that still make sense? Well, keep hanging with me. We need to understand this culture, okay? Number one, this is a culture where there's no social welfare program, guys. There's no health care. There's no, hey, I don't make enough money, or I'm injured and I can get a disability, or I don't make enough money and the government's going to help give me money. There's none of that. For a woman in this society, her success, and I use that term loosely, not because I don't even necessarily mean financial success, but for her as a female to even be able to provide for herself, marriage is key, because she is gonna come under the protection and the guidance of the man that she's her husband. And so in that society, when the woman married, she left her family unit and went and joined his family unit. Okay, so the woman isn't really necessarily going to be able to provide for herself on her own. She lives with her family until that marriage happens. So here's the problem. When notice what it says: a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married. In other words, this particular woman was sexually pure. As a result of this rape, you have now violated her. And in that culture, a woman who was not a virgin, it was going to be very difficult for her to ever get married. So essentially, by him committing this rape on her, he's now condemned her to not get married. He's now condemned her to struggle all her life without being able to care for herself and these things, because her ability to care for them, her parents are going to die off, people are going to die off, and she's not going to be united to a husband to be able to have him provide. So here is the moral wrong that happens is the rape, but it's also you've taken away her ability to be married and to have children and to have a future that is provided for her, that is well provided for her. Now understand, this is different culture, okay? And so some of these words, even provision and things like that, could make people rub the wrong way. We're not talking about modern day. We're talking about the way that this culture functioned, right or wrong. Okay, this is just the understanding of the culture. So God sees these situations happen with the woman, that she's raped. She's now unmarriable. She's now not going to have anybody to care for her and to look out for her. And so as a result, you have now put her, you male have put her in this position that is now severely disadvantaged her, and you are going to take responsibility for it. You actually are going to be responsible to now have to be with her and provide for her and care for her and not leave her destitute. Now, once again, does that necessarily make you feel great about a rape? And is it something that the women may or may not necessarily have wanted? When you understand that culture, her other options are way worse, in the sense of she's going to stay single, she's going to be an outcast because she's sexually impure, all of these kind of things. Those are her other outcomes. And so what God is saying is, you've done this wrong. For me to take you and just put you up separate in some kind of prison system, which they didn't really have at that time anyways, but if they did, it doesn't change her situation. No man is going to want to marry her. She's unmarriable. So me locking you up and putting you away isn't going to help. So you now are going to have to be one to provide for her and care for her. You need to take responsibility for your actions. She now is the one that you are to care for. And so once again, we need to understand that these cultures function differently. We need to understand that what God is saying is not that the rape is right, but you are going to own your behavior, and your consequences are not prison. Your consequences is you now are responsible to care for her and provide for her and own the problems that you've created. So hopefully that helps give you some clarity. And so when we're looking at the Old Testament, this is one of the fundamental flaws, and even the New Testament, but especially the Old, that anybody makes, religious or not, is they look at the Old Testament and they interpret it through the way they think it should be interpreted today. You cannot do that. This is not Western culture. This is not 2022 culture. These are cultures that function very, very differently. And what God is saying is, you have done these things wrong. Not that I'm okaying them, but here is how you are going to have to now deal with the faults that you have committed.
Thank you, Alycia. Yeah, so it's God's way to, for on the one side, to have them deal with the consequences, and on the other hand, to also take care of the person who was wronged as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's actually, sorry to cut you off there, but it's actually one of the fundamental problems with our current prison system. I'm really glad that you actually raised that point, because being a criminal justice major, one of the things, there's something called restorative justice. And it's restorative justice is this idea of restoring the person who committed the wrong, even possibly, if it's possible, reuniting the relationship between the offender and the victim, and also allowing for the person who did something wrong to pay some sort of financial contribution, or maybe they can, maybe they can fix it. Let's say they damage a TV, maybe they can fix it. If not, they buy a new TV, or whatever it might be. So in other words, they are actually personally held responsible for making the situation, whenever way they can, to rectify the situation. That's the restorative justice model. Our current model is, I go into your house, I steal your TV, I get locked up for it, let's say. And that TV is really minute. I should use something much bigger, because maybe they would just make me pay money for something like that. But let's say I steal your car, okay? Or something like that. That's more grievous. So what they're going to do is they're going to give me a penalty for that, but you still are out of a car. And so our current prison system is about penalizing. It's about penalizing the person, the offender. It isn't about restoration of the person or compensation to the victim. This system that you see here involves compensation to the victim. In other words, there is a consequence for you, but you also need to care about the person that you hurt, and not just go away and be locked up somewhere, but you actually need to deal directly with the sins that you've done.
And thank you for that, Alycia. The next question that we have. So the question is, in Christianity, if your ultimate purpose, joy, and value is tied to pleasing God, how is that actually fulfilling, and why would that be enough?
Yeah, and I would think of it this way. One of the things that I think is probably the most frightful in life, that we don't think about, is when we grow, when the things in life no longer bring us pleasure. In other words, this is something that many wealthy people experience. You see mental health very high within even like famous people who are like beyond wealthy, like they have just a ton of money. you see a sense of hopelessness where I have so much money and value, money to my name. There's only so many shirts I can buy, only so many cars I can buy, only so many restaurants I want to eat at. Like, you get bored of these things, and these things in life no longer bring you joy. And that happens oftentimes. It happens, we don't know it's coming. We don't even realize it's coming. But when it happens, the crash can be big, because now you're left with, now what? There's nothing else. I was getting my joy from these things. There's nothing else that can give me joy. And so you run out of things that bring you pleasure. The idea is that if you find your joy in something that can never lose its pleasurability, lose its ability of wonder, lose its ability to excite you, then you'll never really reach that point of feeling like there's nothing else, like the world is dull, that life is small, that there's no point. And so the idea is, even in a general sense, is if your joy is tied up into something that is not always going to be joyful, then at some point your joy will be less, or your joy will go away. But if your joy is tied up in something that is always going to be joyful, then you can never reach the point where it doesn't bring you joy, because it never loses its joyfulness. And so I think that's probably a kind of a way that I can maybe explain that a little bit better. And look, there was times in which, for the Christian, I'll speak specifically for the Christian, that God doesn't always seem to bring us joy. Like, he tells us certain things, or he wants to do things that actually seem to make us miserable. And I'm not talking so much about the day-to-day kind of thing. You know, even in a relationship, a spousal relationship, there's times when the person doesn't make you happy. It doesn't mean that you aren't happily married still. Those little things that happen along the way are the ups and downs, but the overall thing is you're still happily married. And so what I'm saying is finding a source. And this is where the Christian idea of hope is really important, because the idea of hope says that a future goodness, a future joy and happiness is going to come. And there's nothing that happens here that can change the future of what is to come. Because the future, what is to come, is tied into an event that happened in the past, which is the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And we can't change history. So because the future thing that the Christians are looking forward to is a guarantee, then what happens now, it cannot change that, even though there's ups and downs in this life. Let me read you one thing. Okay, this is 1 Peter 1, chapter 3, and this might help nail this down a little bit better for us all. Praise be to the God and Father, our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he's given us new life and brought us into a new hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. And it's brought us into inheritance in the future that can never be ruined, it can never be spoiled, it can never fade. It's kept in heaven for you. And because of your belief in who God is right now, you are shielded by God's power and protected until that time frame comes. And so in this season that you're in, you greatly rejoice. Although you're going to suffer some grief right now, you're going to suffer pain and have all kinds of trials right now. But these have come so that your belief and trust in God is of greater worth and it's even more valuable. And so though you have not seen God right now, you know you love him. And even though you do not see him in this moment, you believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy, because you are receiving the goal of your trust and relationship in God, which is the future relation of an eternity, future relationship and eternity with God. So what it says here is, even though you can't see God right now, you love him and believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy because of the future that's to come. So hopefully that kind of helps you out. It isn't necessarily just the day-to-day, it's the overall larger idea of this idea of hope and a good world that is to come.
Thank you, Alycia. So, like you mentioned this in your talk this morning as well, like having to trust God for who He is. And so, does that apply here in terms of like that's what it ultimately comes down to, is being able to trust that like what you just read is true and is true of Him?
Yeah, I mean, trusting the character of God is important. If God is in any way immoral, I can understand when people say, I don't want to have anything to do with him, because I would say the same thing too. Which is why the character and the nature of God is really, really important. And we look for things when we're reading the Bible to help us to consistently make sure that we are seeing consistent godly character, consistent moral character. I mean, the Bible text even says that I am God, I do not change. And that is important, because if God's morality is all over the place, that means our morality is over the place. And if his morality is over the place, how can I even trust his morality? Because he's just changing and going with the wind, And so I think, being able to trust that the character of God is morally perfect is really important. And being able to know that his character is good, it is good itself, I think are all really, really important things to help us to know that we actually have a future hope that we can trust in.
Well, thank you for that, Alycia. So moving on, our next question also just asks about you had mentioned in your talk this morning how our beliefs impact how we treat others. And so this question is related to that. How does a Christian belief or view on homosexual, transgender people impact how they treat them?
Yeah, okay. Well, we're just getting to all the meaty questions today, guys. I like it. Bring it on. I mean, this is good, right? You need to know, you want to understand. You can't understand everything before you come to belief in something. I don't have to understand everything about mathematics to believe in Pythagorean theorem or believe in the quadratic formula, right? You come to a belief enough where you've done enough mathematics that you know the quadratic formula works or whatever it might be. So we come to believe not that we have all of our questions answered, but as we have a good amount of understanding to say, I've been assured of this many things, I feel confident in believing and continuing to ask and learn more as I go along. So I like this. I like all these questions. So it's interesting because it says, how does a Christian's belief or view on homosexual, transgender people impact how Christians treat them? This is very, very important, guys. Very, very important, because I think what's going to be helpful for us in this particular question is for us to also take a step back and look at what some other belief systems say about people in the LGBTQ community. Okay, so this is going to be important because it isn't just about how does Christianity view them. It's about how whatever worldview we hold to, whatever it is that influences our morality. How does it encourage us or warn us or tell us, instruct us, whatever you want to say, to respond to in this particular community? So if you were to look at atheism, for example, let me give you a quick story. I had a friend who is an atheist, lesbian, and she was doing lunch with me and some other friends of mine. The other friends of mine were Christians, and she was an atheist. And my friend was just bold and just said to her, so I'm a Christian. What does your atheism say about your homosexuality? And my atheist friend said, it says that I am a mistake. And I recognize that that is a problem with my worldview. In other words, what she was saying is this. She was saying that within atheism, a key part of the evolutionary process is survival. We want to find a way for our species to survive. So in other words, mutations or processes that cause destruction to the human species, we're just talking about humanity right now, those things will kill the organism, but other human organisms that have found ways to evolve and adapt to their surroundings are able to survive and pass on their genes. So the whole evolutionary process is about those who have flawed genes. Those genes will die out because they won't be able to reproduce accurately. And those who have really good, strong, solid genes, those will produce and create more and more and more people. So in other words, reproduction is a key part of our survival. And those that reproduce and are able to reproduce and replicate their genes are helping our species survive. What she essentially was saying is, look, I'm a mistake. I'm a genetic mutation that's a mistake. Like, I can't reproduce. I can't help the species to continue on. Now, that is not what I'm saying as a Christian. I'm just explaining to you as an atheist, this is what she says about her worldview. This is what atheism says about her. I've listened to some other people, some other major atheists, and they were asked, like, what is the value of an LGBTQ person? And here are some things I've heard. Well, the value of an LGBTQ person within the evolutionary framework is that a person who's LGBT, I should say LGB, I'll just say that first. LGB is, and maybe, and also the various, I would say maybe spectrums that come off of that, are going to be, we might find out one day that they are super musical and they have particular talents and gifts that help other people who are heterosexual. Or I've heard people say, people who are I shouldn't say bi, I should say LG. Sorry, I shouldn't be saying LGB. LG, so same-sex attracted or homosexual. These people might be able to become good babysitters so that people who are heterosexual can spend a lot of time alone together or go out to eat or go on dates. And as a result of that, are able to better, to love each other better, make the relationship stronger, and in turn, have more kids and reproduce. So essentially what I'm hearing from the big popular atheist crowd is the benefit of homosexuality within the atheistic naturalistic framework and evolutionary framework is that you are good to us if you develop a certain talent that we can use, or you are good to our society if you become babysitters. That's what I'm hearing. So in other words, your value is tied up in what you can bring to us, either a talent or the ability to be a babysitter. That is problematic. Because that says that your value is tied up in what you do. It is not intrinsic within you. You don't have value in and of yourself. Your value is achieved based off of your actions. That's a problem for me. Massive problem for me. As a Christian, if we were to talk about Islam, this is kind of a no-brainer within Islam. Just several years ago in Iran, I think somewhere maybe around 2015, something like that. Two teenage boys who were caught in a homosexual relationship were publicly hanged for their same-sex relationship. The Quran does not have any room for homosexuality at all. So we've looked at atheism, we've looked at Islam, which is why, yeah. So all that to say, let me just move on. But let me just say, so Christianity would then say this: the value of every human being is closely tied up with the person who made them. In other words, the value is inherent within each being because it's not something that we achieve by doing a bunch of good things or saying a bunch of good things. It is related to the being who made us himself. Now, I can't remember if I used this example or not, but if you think about, and actually I did, I think I mentioned this idea of value and of a painting and how our life, our value is tied up with our creator, right? So if our value is tied up with the creator who made the painting or the artist who made the painting, then as creation, our value is tied up with the creator. And he says we are valuable as we are. Whether you're lesbian, you're valuable. Whether you're gay, you're valuable. Whether you're transgendered, you're valuable. Whether you're heterosexual, you're valuable. Whether you're a gossiper, you're valuable. Whatever you are, you can keep going down the list. Because our value is not tied in with our actions. And so what Christianity tells us then is it tells us that there is a God that says my humans are so valuable that I will die for them. So as a result, what Christianity tells tells us about how we should treat the LGBT community is it tells us that we need to treat them with the ultimate love and patience and grace and kindness that we would treat anybody else. Like there's nothing different about the LGBT community for the Christian in terms of treatment. So there's nothing that makes them different. It's like, treat these people the same, but these people over here in the LGBT community, you need to treat them different. That's not how Christianity works. It's all people are going to be treated equally and valuably. And so because of the Christian framework, it grounds everybody as equals in the eyes of God in terms of our value. Now, it doesn't mean that we need to agree with somebody's behavior in order to love them or value them. Think of a parent who's constantly telling their child, no, don't do this, or no, don't do that. Does the parent love the child less when it tells them no? Of course not. It's actually out of love that they tell them no, because they're trying to protect them. They're trying to help them. Don't touch the hot stove. Even if the child doesn't get it, it doesn't mean the parent is wrong. Even if the child says, you're so mean, you're always trying to restrict me, you won't let me live the way I want to live, you won't let me do what I want to do, I want to touch the hot stove. The parent is trying to protect them from touching the hot stove and getting their hand burnt. It's out of love for the child that the parent tells them, this is the way in which you should live, even though the child may not feel loved. So I don't want to say because we love and value people, not because they're babysitters. That's so ridiculous. That's so dehumanizing. And not because they might have a great musical talent. That's still dehumanizing. We love them because they are creators or creations of the Creator. And so Christians then speak about morally what's right or wrong because of their love for the person. They don't always do it out of love. I'm not stupid here. And I know Christians mess things up. It seems like more than they get right in the public, to be honest. And it makes me very frustrated. Christians have not always responded lovingly and kindly. Christians have messed this issue up all over the place and for years. And it's wrong the way that we have treated people. It's wrong the way that we've talked about people, slandered people, gossiped about people because of their sexual orientation. It is a sin and it's wrong. And if there's any Christians listening to me and you have done any of those things, where you've slandered somebody because of their sexual orientation or because they're trans, or you've insulted them, or if you mocked them or criticized them, I would encourage you to go to that person and ask for forgiveness, because that was wrong. That is not the way in which God would have us treat people. And so I would encourage you to apologize and ask for forgiveness, because the damage that we have done is massive. But what Christianity teaches is a whole different view. Hopefully that helps you guys as you process through that. Thank you for that question. It was a long answer, but it's because it's a big question.
Yeah, thank you, Alycia. And actually, still kind of related to this previous question, like just again, a question about talking about meaning and value. So this next question asks, how can our lives have meaning if we are all going to die anyways and God's plan will never change?
Sure. So that is why the atheistic view of meaning isn't enough, because it doesn't matter what we do here, because it didn't matter to anybody else outside of here. So if we're all going to die, then meaning is irrelevant, because it didn't really matter what we actually did here on this planet. Now, and God's plan will never change. That's an interesting one. Yes, because God's ultimate plan will never change, but the actions and things that we do today do mean something to him right now. So it is, and he is not going to die off like the earth is going to die off, right? We do meaning for humans who will die off within the atheistic framework. So that meaning wasn't really relevant, because we all die off anyways when the whole universe collapses and burns, or however it destroys itself, okay? But if there's a God, then the meaning isn't just about you and me. It's about what does it mean to him? And because he doesn't die off, he's still eternal, and what I did still was meaningful for him, meaningful to him. And so his ultimate plan will never change, yes. And because his ultimate plan will never change, it is important that we do things now that are meaningful to him.
Thank you, Alycia. So the following question that we have, how can it be morally right for God to send people to hell?
Right. We can't say, oh, God's character is good, and then we say, and then you make them suffer and go through a whole bunch of things. All right. So let me just say, first of all, there are several things that we know about hell from the Bible. And it's actually probably different than what you've seen in movies and what you've seen in shows or documentaries. Here's what we know about hell. We know that it exists. We know that it's bad. And we know you don't want to go there. That's what we know. And we know you don't have to go there. Okay. So we know that it's not good. We know it exists, and we know that you're not going to want to go there. That is what is confirmed to us within the scriptures. Now, the Christian views on how long it's going to be. Is it eternal? Is it for a period of time based on how many wrongs you did in life? All of those things Christians roll around and in a variety of different theological circles. But the reality is you have to understand what hell is. What hell is ultimately God giving you what you want. You can't understand hell unless you understand heaven. What heaven is it's a world in which we are closely connected with God. Closely. We are in his presence. He is with us all the time. And so it's not like I'm like, oh, I just need a break from you, God. I got to go somewhere. You're really annoying me, or I really don't like you, and I just need to get away from you. You can't do that in heaven. You're with him all the time. Why does that matter? Well, several years ago, Stephen Fry, the British actor and atheist, was asked, he was in an interview with a guy named Gay Byrne, I believe his name was Gay Byrne. And he asked them, look, what if you're wrong in this whole atheism thing? What if there really is a God and you die? What are you going to tell them so that you can get in? And I'm going to paraphrase him, but basically he says, I don't want to get in. I don't want to go there. This God allows suffering of children. He allows all of this pain that he doesn't stop. I don't want to go there. So let's think about this. If he's saying, I don't want to be with you, God, then looking at the question, is it morally right for God to say, I don't care what you want, I'm going to force you to be with me anyways for all of eternity? If he's saying, I don't want you, God, I don't want to go there, I don't want to be there, is it morally right for God to then force him to be there? When we understand what heaven is, it helps us better understand hell. And so what hell is ultimately God saying, look, you want your way, you can go into hell. Now, there is a sense in which God will be, I believe that God is present in hell, but it is going to be his wrath and his justice that people experience. If God is everywhere, and then he's going to be in hell in some capacity, but you're not going to experience what this heaven version of him is, just loving and peaceful, no more tears, no more suffering, no more pain. What you're going to experience is the wrath and the justice. So ultimately, it is, I think of it less as God sending people to hell and more about people sending themselves. People saying, I don't want to have anything to do with you, God. I want to go. Or not even that I want to go to hell, but I don't want to go there. And the only other option is hell. So when you look at that, I think that for me helps put things in a different framework. When I look at things through the lens of what heaven is. In heaven, you are eternally shut in with God. You are eternally with him. And if you don't want him now, then heaven is going to be hell for you.
Thank you, Alycia. So this next question is a little bit lengthy, so okay. Apologize for the smaller text, but just to try to fit everything on the slide. So it says this, you said that Richard Dawkins' comment is devaluing humans, but aborting those with Down syndrome is not to get rid of them. It is immoral to let it live because we spare them from the suffering they would endure. I doubt my atheist friends would say that they're aborting the babies because they are worth less than a normal child. We abort them because they are valuable and we want to spare them from the hurt. You say they would be happy, but they experience lower thinking levels, faster memory loss, heart problems, complications with all five senses, and reduced lifespan. Can you clarify your arguments?
Great, thank you. One thing I would want to make clear within this particular question is says that we abort them because they are valuable. Within atheism, you don't have inherent value. So a Down syndrome baby doesn't have intrinsic value. There's nothing to give it value. Within the atheism framework, your value is earned. It's based off of things that you do in society. It's based off your contributions and these things like that. So I don't know if I would agree that people abort them because they believe they're valuable in atheism, because they don't believe that they're valuable. Your value is achieved later on. Now, of course, I'm talking about atheism. You tell a mother who's pregnant with a child whether or not that child's valuable, that's a different story, even if she is an atheist. she's still going to be like, I see value in my child potentially, or she may not. The point is, I'm just saying this is what atheism teaches. Doesn't mean everybody actually lives like that.
So, sorry, can I just enter or just ask a follow-up question? So in that case, like, is there like a mix of worldviews going on, like for someone to be arguing value, like that's already outside of the realm of what they think they believe?
Exactly. It is. It's already outside the realm of atheism. And the reality is, friends, is 100% atheism is really hard to live by. It's so I know somebody who is probably the most consistent atheist friend that I have. This particular person has said it's a female, but has said, they love animals more than humans. They value nature more than humans, and they love nature and animals more than humans. It's one of the reasons why they never had children. One of the reasons why they never had children, or the main reason they never had children, is because humans are so destructive to the natural world around us that they didn't want to bring any more humans into this world to be destructive. And they can't wait for the human species to finally go away and be done so that nature can grow and do its thing, because we're so destructive to nature. Additionally, they're not the nicest person, which of course is going to be different for every person. They're very snappy, but they're also at the same time very friendly. Also at the same time very, very caring. And I think, as I meet a variety of atheists, not all atheists are going to be like that or going to think like that. But what this person does is at least they're consistent. Humans have no value. Why in the world would I love humans over the natural world? The natural world is beautiful. Humans destroy it. Because humans destroy it, they have no value. They're not important. And so I can't wait for them to be eliminated, for them to go extinct. And so I think that, yes, people oftentimes will borrow ideas from Christianity or other belief systems, because real 100% atheism is very depressing. And it's very, very hard to live by. I think Bertrand Russell's Man's Search for Meaning was that? No, sorry, I'm getting things confused. Sorry. Bertrand Russell had a really fantastic quote on the meaninglessness of life without God. And the reality is, it's a really depressing kind of quote, like basically like we need to accept as atheists that nothing we do really matters. We're just a bunch of atoms. We're just a bunch of cells. Yeah, we have consciousness, but that doesn't make us any better than anybody else. We're just conscious, unaware. And everything we do is just going to be obliterated at the end of the universe. And we need to live in this dismal, dire, sad, miserable state. Is essentially what he says in his quote. And he's not being a jerk. He's just saying, look, we've got to accept what our worldview teaches us, that there's such meaninglessness in life, and that things aren't valuable. Humans are not valuable. So even the fact that people would say we abort them because they're valuable actually is not really atheism. If you see value in a human, I would then have to ask you, why is that human valuable? It hasn't done anything to achieve its value yet. And just because you think it's valuable doesn't mean it is. A little child will see a toy as valuable, and the parent will look at it and be like, that little cheap thing I got from the dollar store, or it cost me $2. It's not valuable. But the child sees it as valuable. Just because the child sees it as valuable doesn't mean that the actual toy is valuable. No, it just means it's valuable to the child. But the toy itself doesn't just become valuable because we want to assign value to it. So Christianity would say that baby is valuable within the womb. So that was one point I would say. So I guess my next point then would just be to say, it says you said they would be happy, but they experienced lower thinking levels, faster memory loss, heart problems, complications. I guess once again, I think I'd refer to the study. The study seems to show that they're happy with lower thinking levels. They're happy with faster memory loss. They're happy with all of the different things that are happening with them. Like, it isn't my words, that because I've never had Down syndrome, so I definitely don't want to speak on behalf of somebody, but I know, but when I read the excerpt from that study, it was really telling to me, because we make these assumptions that if somebody doesn't function at the same level as we are, that they hate their life and they feel like their life is not worth living. And what that study showed is that's not necessarily true. Look at children. A 5-year-old doesn't have the same knowledge level as a 50-year-old, and they think life is great. They're happy with that. They know their insufficiencies and they're happy with it. So I think I would say that it doesn't seem to become something that is a problem for Down syndrome. And that, I think, is the thing that's telling. Additionally, I had a neighbor whose daughter had what's called Angelman syndrome. And the mother told me that they call it Angelman syndrome. And she was severely intellectually disabled, didn't really talk much at all. So pretty severe. She could walk, but maybe with help and things like that. But the mother said that they call her Angelman syndrome because they're always so happy. They're always smiling. And she smiled a lot. She was happy to see everybody. If you came up driving, she was outside, she'd want to hug you. She was so happy to see you. I guess I would say, I don't think we should project what we might think of what we would feel like if we had some of these intellectual or physical disabilities. There's so many people who have physical, end up in a wheelchair or paralyzed, and they still find life worth living. And I think that us making those determinations for somebody else is risky, because we're saying, I can't imagine this person would be happy if I let them live instead of aborting them. That's a call we made. We've never asked them. But if this Down syndrome baby lived, based on that study, they are more than likely to say, I'm so happy with my life.
Thank you, Alycia. And so this next question just picks up on something we said earlier about the mixing of worldviews. And so the question is, I believe that there are locked-in values in Christianity. Is it wrong to still have our own set of moral and values for the things that were not mentioned in the Bible? If yes, how do we determine if what we think that isn't mentioned in the Bible is right or wrong?
Sure, that's a good question, because the Bible doesn't say, hey, you should not get on Google and look at really bad images at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? It doesn't say that, right? And so how do we then know how to live with so many other things that maybe we haven't had to deal with in the past? Because technology is changing, cultures are changing, and the like. So I think one thing that can be helpful is there's a verse actually repeated in the Bible where it says, all things are beneficial, but not all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial. All things are permissible, but I will not be mastered by anything. So I'll say it again. All things are permissible, but not everything is beneficial. All things are permissible, but I will not be mastered by anything. In other words, what it says is, look, there's lots of things out there that you can do, but they're not going to be beneficial for you. Just because you can do it doesn't mean it's beneficial for you. And for me, when I run across some of these things that are, it's like, wow, how do I know what to do with it? That's a verse that really helps me to understand, okay, here's how I need to think about things. Here's how I need to consider my actions and the things that I say. And so I think there's a lot of moral things that we know within the Bible. And there's a lot of things that we know, like the Bible doesn't say don't drive drunk, for example. The Bible tells us not to be drunk, but it doesn't say don't drive drunk. But you know what? Do we need the Bible to tell us not to drive drunk? Or can we see the outcomes of it and know that's not something I should do? I think that there's a sense in which we also can recognize from the consequences of certain things around us, that number one, we shouldn't even be getting in a car drunk because we're not supposed to be drunk in the first place. If we're not supposed to be drunk in the first place, then getting in a car and driving drunk is going to also be bad. So we know that the Bible says don't be drunk. So we know getting in a car and driving drunk, therefore, is bad because you're already in the wrong. So all that to say, I do think that verse is really helpful to me for things that aren't necessarily mentioned. Is this beneficial for me, even though it may be permissible? And now, of course, the beneficial is going to be subjective, so it adds this other caveat, right? Because I'll say, oh yeah, it's beneficial for me to smoke this or drink this. I might say that. The caveat says, but I will not be mastered by anything. That's the rest of the verse. So all things are permissible, not all things are beneficial. All things are permissible, but I will not be mastered by anything. In other words, nothing should have control over me. Nothing should make me like be an addiction or be something that I serve or something that I lose self-control over. Nothing, because once I've lost self-control and I'm just drawn to it, and it's like it's making me do these things. This is addiction. These are things that are mastering me. So in the same sense, you shouldn't be mastered by anything. And I think that those guidelines can really be helpful for us as we look towards doing some of the things that might be a little bit harder to know because it's not necessarily written in the Bible.
Well, thank you for that, Alycia. So the next question takes things in a bit of a different direction.
Okay, let's go
so
then.
the question here, why do I need to go to church? I believe in God, but the church overall in history has done more harm than good.
Okay, great question. Yes. Well, let's take this in a couple different parts. The purpose of going to church isn't because the church is perfect. It isn't because you can't be a Christian unless you go to church. But I would say this. You go to church because, number one, you want to help make you want to develop relationships with other Christians in your life. You want to just also learn scripture with other Christians, learn the Bible with other Christians. It's interesting because when we understand other cultures, it can obviously really help us understand certain aspects. And there's in Indonesia, I believe it's Indonesia. There's in Indonesian, there's a word for not being alone. Like, so for example, if somebody has to go on an errand and they got to do it alone, somebody could go with them. Somebody should go with them because they don't like the person to be alone. In other words, in that culture, you do things together. In the Western world, we like to be very individual. I do my own thing, you do your own thing. But in many parts of the world, they like to do things together and culturally together. And so going to church gives you the opportunity to once a week or twice a week or 3 times, however often you go, to learn about God and talk about God together with other people. If something's going on in your life, you've got people there that can pray for you, that can listen to you talk or cry or discuss it. These are opportunities that you don't want to pass up. Also, if you think about, I remember, I shouldn't say I remember. If any of you watch any kind of animal documentaries, you'll notice that when there's like a pack of antelope, what a lion or whatever predator is there wants to do is they want to isolate the antelope away from the pack. Because when the antelope is in with the pack, it's got strength in the numbers of the pack. But what the lion tries to do is try and get it to run off on its own. So now it's just it and the lion can get it. I think that also us trying to think that we can do everything on our own, this also leaves us open. There's a lot of things going wrong. Maybe we start to form ideas about who God is that are incorrect. Maybe we have incorrect understandings of him. Maybe we start to read the Bible incorrectly. Maybe we start to believe things that are incorrect because you don't have anybody there walking alongside and helping you think through some of these things. And so that's one of the risks that can happen. I would say, though, I would disagree with the idea, though, that the church overall in history has done more harm than good. I actually would say the opposite. If you look at the humanitarian organizations around the world, they are overwhelmingly Christian. It could be child sponsorship things. It could be Samaritan's Purse is a massive nonprofit organization that goes and deals with disaster relief. There's something called mercy ships, which docks at certain poor countries, developing world countries, and offers free medical care. People can come on and the docks there for like a month or 3 months, 6 months. I don't remember how long it docks at a particular port. And people are just getting free medical treatment, surgeries, and all these kind of things that they need. The largest nonprofit in the world is an organization called World Vision. And it's a child sponsorship organization to sponsor children around the world that also does providing meals. You can buy a goat for a family. You can buy a rabbit for a family. You can do certain things that you can also do to help fund and support families. So the church, all these organizations that I mentioned are Christian organizations. And in America, we got the American Red Cross. We have the Salvation Army. These are massive Christian organizations, at least Christian founded. They may not be as Christian focus as much anymore, some of them. But the point is they were founded because of their Christian belief system. So actually, I think the church has done a lot of good. Yeah, it's done harm. Of course it is. Look at colonialism. I remember speaking with a young woman who she wasn't from India, but her family was. And she was an atheist, was very angry, wasn't even considering Christianity because of Christian colonialism in India from the British. I get it. If there's times where colonialism has not been good. If not many times, most times, all times, however we want to quantify it. And so, yeah, there's definitely times when Christians have not done good. But I think the overwhelming majority is that there's a lot of things that they have done right. And we need to not discount those and only think about the ones that they have gotten wrong.
Thank you, Alycia. I think it's easy just because it's always the bad things that we hear about that are pointed out, but we never really mention the good things. And so there are a lot of good things. Thank you. So we just have about 5 minutes left, but still some couple of questions. We'll see how many of these we can get to. So we'll just move right along. And so the next question that we have, the example you gave about how God is morally good, perfect, and therefore he is trustworthy. Wouldn't that be the belief or perception from someone else who believes in another God, say Buddha?
Okay. So let's look at, let's say Islam, for example. Yes, so they would say that their God is morally perfect, morally good and morally perfect, but there's no way to test that. In other words, many other religions will say their God is morally perfect, or that good things come because God says it, but there's no way to actually trust that outside of God making those statements about himself. So in other words, the gods of different religions will say things like, I am good, I am perfect, I am morally right, whatever. But how do I know that? And so this is, I think, what makes Christianity unique. One of the questions oftentimes people like to ask is, it's so wrong of you to say that Christianity is the only way. And the reality, or that your God is the only true God. But the reality is, I will share this, what I'm about to share with you, I think is one of the fundamental things that makes Christianity unique. And it's what makes Christianity different than other belief systems. And it's what demonstrates the moral perfection of the Christian God that no other religion demonstrates. So let me tell you what I'm meaning here. It's one thing for us to say that God is morally good and perfect. But if they actually are, then they would have to do, that means that it's to say they're morally good, where it means that they have done, that nobody can be a better good than them. Okay, so they're morally good, they're more perfect. Nobody can outdo them in goodness. If I could be more good than God, then how is he God, right? I'm more morally perfect than him, let's say. It's going to be very important then for us to know that God can do the highest moral perfection that's possible. And I think if I was to ask, just take a general poll of the audience or people listening, and I was to say, what would you say is the greatest ethic that we can have? And most people would say love. Love is the greatest ethic. And if I was to say, what is the greatest way that we can show love? So we know the greatest ethic. What's the greatest way in which we can show the greatest ethic? Most people would say through self-sacrifice. That's pretty standard. Jesus himself said that. He said, there's no greater love that anybody has, and they lay down their life for a friend. Okay. We see this with military. We see this with parents that will give their life for their child. So the idea that you would sacrifice your life because of your love for somebody else we see that kind of evidence in our lives. But here's what's interesting. In Christianity, it shows that we have a God who sacrificed himself. So in other words, we have a God who did the greatest ethic, love, in the greatest possible way through self-sacrifice, through the sacrifice of Jesus, which is why it's interesting when it says in the book of Romans, chapter 5, verse 8, that God shows his love for us all. And that while we hated him, while we didn't want him, while we didn't like him, Jesus dies for us. Now you're like, what? Jesus dies for us? How is God showing his love for us if Jesus dies? Well, in Christianity, we believe that Jesus is God himself. So in other words, God shows love for us. He shows his love for us Doesn't just say it. He shows his love for us through the sacrifice of himself. In other words, in Christianity, God does the greatest possible good, which is love, in the greatest possible way, which is through self-sacrifice. So there's no way we can then be more good or gooder or better than God, because anything we do that's good is just trying to reach to his level. So in other words, yes, other belief systems will say that God is good, God is morally perfect, but he isn't showing it. Buddha did not self-sacrifice for humanity. Muhammad did not self-sacrifice for humanity. Allah did not self-sacrifice for humanity. In Mormonism, Jesus is one of many gods, but he's not God the Father, the supreme God. That is separate than Jesus. So God, the supreme God, doesn't sacrifice for humanity. Only Jesus does. In Jehovah's Witness belief system, Jesus is an angel called Michael. And so an angel sacrifices himself for humanity, but God doesn't sacrifice himself for humanity. If God doesn't sacrifice himself for humanity, that means I could give my life for you, and I would have just done a greater good than God himself can do. How is he God if I can do a greater good than him? But in Christianity, God does the greatest good possible. And so that is what makes it unique to me. And that's why, yes, other people, other religions will say God is morally good and perfect. He doesn't show it in the greatest possible way. So that leaves me to question, because my question for a Muslim is, if Allah is morally perfect, then why are you giving your life for him and doing a greater good for him? He will never give his life for you. Yet you are giving your life for him and doing a greater good than he will ever do for you. How then is he great?
Thank you, Alycia. I know we're at the end of our time, but maybe we'll just ask one last question here before we wrap up. So our final question for today, if God cannot command us to do things against his moral character, how do we reconcile his commands to conquer and kill people in the Old Testament?
Okay. I love that we're like, yeah, we'll do one more. It just happens to be a big one with a very long explanation. Okay. I am completely fine with this question. This question became something that was, I would say, one of the most popular questions that I would get asked. I think it was probably due in large part to the fact that Richard Dawkins, in his book, The God Delusion, just criticized the God of the Old Testament. And so as a result, this question became a really big deal. So let me just quickly do the best I can, because this is a really long answer, only because, once again, we're getting into a different culture. Okay. So number one, guys, once again, we cannot read the Bible through 2022 eyes. We need to understand it through a different cultural lens and what's going on, because this particular question would not have been asked by anybody at that time. It was asked by us, but it would not be asked by them. When with the cultures and the way the cultures would have existed around them, these particular things about people being conquered and killed was the normal way that other people and their gods behave. So this is a question we ask, but not necessarily one that they would have asked. But let me go on with it. Several years ago, I ran into a well-known politician from America in England. And I was studying apologetics at the time, which is the field that I work in, which is giving logical reasons as to why Christianity is true. And I was talking with this particular person, and they said, "What do you study?" And I told them, oh boy, here we go. So I told them what I study was just apologetics and answering the big questions in the Bible. And this particular person said, "Well, have you gotten to the part of your school yet where they talk about why God did the things that he did in the Old Testament? It seems like he's a horrible person." I gave some very, very short answer, because it was like one of those things where they ask you a question, you got 7 seconds, literally 7 seconds. So I just blah, 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 blah. And at the same time, they then said, and also, why did God allow Hitler to do what he did? And so I want you to notice what they did here. They said, why did God act against things in the Old Testament? And why did God not act against Hitler? In other words, God was wrong when he acted, and God was wrong when he didn't act. So my question is, when is God ever right? When we're okay with what he does? When is he right? Because when he acts out and carries out judgment in the Old Testament, he's wrong. When he doesn't carry out judgment immediately on day 2 of Hitler's reign, he's wrong. So let's take a look back and recognize that we are coming into these questions with a lot of background kind of assumptions. Number one, you need to understand the people group that God was telling his people to deal with. Number one, these Canaanites, what they were from the land of Canaan, they were doing a lot of very evil things that we would consider evil, even at this time. One of the things that they were doing was they were sacrificing their children. Another thing that in that culture would not have seemed problematic. However, that's not how God wanted his people to behave. And they would literally sacrifice their children by burning the child alive, by placing it on the arms of their god Molech, and place the child across the arms, and as the light a fire underneath it, strike up a band to play, so it's playing very loudly, so they can hear the child screaming and crying as it's burning. Additionally, prostitution, marriage unfaithfulness. The woman had to be faithful to her husband, but the man did not have to be faithful to the wife. He could be with multiple women. So there was a lot of actions that were happening in this culture that God did not want to permeate into his people. And he also wanted to carry out justice on the fact that they're doing so many evil things like sacrificing their children. So by God stepping in and doing this, he actually saved the lives of innocent children that would have been in a future way sacrificed. Regardless, let me keep going. As we look at these passages, it doesn't actually seem like he was wiping out massive amounts of people either. There's a lot of what's called exaggeration in the text. And we know this because you'll see things like God says, go in and wipe out everything. Everything that's breathing, go wipe it out. Go kill them all. And then you read a few chapters later and God says, now that you're in the land with the people who live there that you were supposed to have wiped out, now that you live with these people, let me tell you how you're supposed to live with them. In other words, if they really wiped them out, then why are they still there? And why is God telling his people how to now live with the people that are still there? So there's what's called ancient Near Eastern exaggeration. And we see this outside of the Bible. I think it's an Egyptian king that says, I wiped the Hebrews or the Israelites. I can't remember which word he used, but same people group. There's different names at different parts of history. But I wiped the Hebrews the Hebrews, like they're completely annihilated. I wiped them off the face of the planet. Well, except the Jews are still around today. The Hebrews still exist today. The Israelites still exist today. The Jews, they're all descendants of the same people group. So this is a king just bragging that, oh, I wiped them out, but he really didn't. And so we see this kind of ancient Near East, same thing we would do all the time. Oh, I played on the soccer field and we annihilated the other people. We won 10-2. We annihilated them. Well, you actually didn't annihilate them. You're just using that as a description of how big the defeat was. And so it seems like what's actually happening is people were fighting, God's people were fighting at military forts, whereas women and children would have been in separate areas. Regardless, here is the key thing that we need to understand. In order for God to be morally perfect, he needs to be a God of justice and judgment. And when God carries out judgment in the Old Testament, it is oftentimes much more immediate and much more in our face than we oftentimes realize. But there's also mercy in the Old Testament because he's allowed these people to carry on this way for many years before he finally steps in and says, enough. And keep in mind, now that we know that they were sacrificing their children alive and burning their children to their gods alive, wouldn't we think God immoral for not stepping in and doing something? Wouldn't we be immoral if we saw a child burning alive and we didn't intervene and do something? So we need to, now that we understand more of the culture and the context, it changes how we see things. But God let people carry on in these behaviors. He was merciful, let it happen for a certain period of time, seeing if they would change. He carries out judgment at another period of time because enough is enough. And he does it in the Old Testament, but he also does it in the New Testament. The God in the New Testament is merciful and loving and kind. And he also carries out judgment, except in the New Testament, the difference is it is not on humans that judgment is carried out for the wrongs that they've done and the evils that they've done. The judgment is carried out on Jesus himself. And on him is the penalty for all the wrongs of humanity. And so it's the same God in the Old Testament and the New. It's just that all that changes is that on whom the penalty falls. On the Old Testament, people did things wrong, it fell on them. They were struck dead immediately if they touched the Ark of the Covenant. They would, all kind of things. As you read the Old Testament, people are suffering for this, they're dying for this, because of what they've done wrong. In the New Testament, it shifts where the penalty falls on Jesus. We now come to God, we ask him for forgiveness. He forgives us. Justice is delayed until this world is finished, and justice is delayed then when we have to stand before God. So that is a lot of what's going on in the Old Testament. God is dealing with judgment. And I don't want to serve a God that doesn't believe in justice and that doesn't believe in carrying out consequences for people who do things wrong.
Thank you for that, Alycia. Yes, we ended with quite the doozy of a question there. So thank you for that. And just, overall, we'd just like to thank you once again so much for your time for both last week, this week, and also the messages that you shared with us on Sunday. We really do appreciate you being able to join us, even though just in a virtual format, but hopefully maybe one of these years, if that we can actually get you up here to Scarborough to join us. So thank you, Alycia. So just a few things. If you missed our service this morning, or if you want to rewatch it, and both the Q&A and the service will be on our church YouTube channel at Scarborough Chinese Alliance Church. So you can go there if you want to rewatch it. And a reminder that our series, Why Should I Care If God Exists, will continue through the remainder of the month of June. And so next week for our service, Abdu Murray joins us in person, speaking on the topic, Is Faith the Enemy of Equality? Speaking to the hot button issues of our day, specifically on race and gender and how the Bible justifies our desire for equality, but a naturalistic worldview does not. And so as with the rest of the month, there will be a Q&A after next week's service as well. And again, because Abdu Murray will join us in person, that will be a live Q&A next week. And also just to mention as well, and so there, because we want to make the most of Abdu Murray's time with us here, that weekend, there will also be an in-person gathering at our Gormley campus on the Saturday. So this coming Saturday evening at our Gormley campus, June 18th, 7 p.m. He will also be hosting a talk there, Finding Clarity in a Culture of Confusion. And that talk will be followed also by a live Q&A at that time. And so for that event, admission is free. Childcare is provided as well, but we ask if you need childcare to pre-register for that. And so all the details are on our website, scac.org/em. Again, if you still have questions from today that were not answered, please join us again. We will forward the queue of questions, and I guess Alycia, Abdu will take over for you for any of the questions that were not answered this week. So again, thank you for all of you for joining us. Thank you, Alycia, once more. And hopefully this time has been encouragement to you. And if you do have any further questions beyond, if it's something with regards to what you heard to today, please do, again, contact us. You can do so through our website, and we would be happy to answer any more questions that you may have. So that concludes our time this morning.
Can I say one quick thing, Aaron? Sorry.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Just one quick thing. Just thank you all for having me. It's really nice to be with you for second year here. And yes, I hope to one day actually see your faces, because I know you all know mine by now. But it'd be nice to actually see your faces one day. And just want to just say in conclusion, there's always going to be questions about the Bible, and we need to, and Christianity, and we need to look at it as not, because there's questions, therefore this isn't true. We look at it, this is a belief system that if I have questions, I can ask them, and I can see if there's so many answers out there. I may not be able to answer everything, but at least I can ask questions of it, and I can engage with Christianity with my mind. And so I would encourage everybody who hasn't looked at Christianity to just take a look at it. Take a look at Jesus. His message was unique. He didn't claim to point the way to some higher power. He claimed to be the way to that higher power, that God, which is very unique, very different. And at the same time, we are told that your approval before God is not based off of your good deeds. It's based off of the fact that you have trusted and believed in the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. And so I'd encourage you to take a look at these texts I believe in Christianity not because I think it's cute, because honestly, it's not always fun, and it tells us to sacrifice things I don't want to sacrifice, but I believe in it because I've been convinced of the truth of it. And as you look into it, I hope that you will be convinced of the truth of it as well.
All right. Thank you once more. Thank you, Alycia. And we hope to have you join us again. And so have a fantastic week as we go. God bless and take care. So, goodbye.